Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jane Dutton. Iraqis have endured invasion, economic stagnation, wars, sanctions and internal conflict for decades. Today, in the aftermath of the 7-year war in Iraq, citizens lack even the most basic of services, leaving many of them feeling helpless, desperate and in utter disbelief that their homeland is still in a state of chaos. Now, the United Nations is promising to create a better future for the people of Iraq. The UN will work closely with the government, civil organizations, academia, and the private sector to achieve a series of development goals in Iraq. These goals are eradicate extreme poverty and hunger, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality, and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability, and create global partnership for development. To find out more about the Millennium Development Goals or whether the UN will be able to succeed in achieving them, I'm joined from Erbil by Christine McNabb. Ms. McNabb is the Director of the Office of Development and Humanitarian Support of the United Nations Assistance Mission for Iraq and also the United Nations Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Iraq. And from Baghdad by Ali Baban, the Iraqi Minister of Planning and Development Cooperation. Welcome both of you to the program. Ms. McNabb, they're very commendable goals, these Millennium Development Goals, but how do you plan to go about achieving them?
It's not really a matter of whether they're commendable. It's a matter of the fact that they are a very, very good shorthand for a development agenda for any country. And even in a country like Iraq, which is still struggling with the impact of conflict, they do give us very clear guidelines of what needs to be done. They're not just development goals because they also concentrate on the most vulnerable. So they're also humanitarian goals. Can we achieve them by 2015? It's possible. It's going to be very, very difficult, partly because of the violence. But we're working closely with the ministries, and the Minister of Planning is one of our close partners. We have a network of 600 UN workers across the country. These are national staff. We have another 150 international staff who are working in and out of the country as possible. And this is done in close coordination, as you said, with local NGOs. And the local NGOs and our local staff are going to be the real heroes of the Millennium Development Goals because we can help them and we can support them. But with government, and especially with the local government and local societies, they are already making a difference.
But this is a very big week for Iraq. You touched on the violence. It's one of the bloodiest months since the invasion. The US troops have pulled out, which will eventually leave Iraq with only 50,000 support troops. There's still not a government in place. There's sewage running down the street in certain parts of the country. The basic services aren't there. Who really cares about these goals? Who has the desire to push them forward?
Are you still asking me, or are you asking His Excellency the Minister?
I am asking you.
Okay. Who has the desire? Well, I certainly have the desire, and my team has the desire, but that's not enough. I mean, it has to come from within. It has to come from the country. And I don't quite recognize the picture you painted, because although there is terrific violence still going on, there is also normal life going on in many parts of the country. Many governorates, people are actually able to go about their business. Hospitals have been rebuilt or new hospitals built. We have been rebuilding the schools. The access to clean water is increasing, and I would be the first to admit it's not fast enough. Sanitation is still a huge issue, and the environment has been terribly neglected.
Mr. Baban, do you, excuse me interjecting
are getting
here.
better access.
Okay, Mr. Baban, do you support these goals? Do you think that this is something that is achievable within your country?
Of course, we achieved a lot, but the problem, as you diagnose it, the lack of stability in the country. The country faced many challenges. The chaos, the political antagonism, the lack of stability. This is the main problems and challenge which the country faces. I think without defeating, without overcoming those problems, we cannot achieve a lot. You are not talking about a normal country. You are talking about extraordinary situation. So we should take this in our consideration.
How do you think these goals, which are often cited as being better suited to Africa, how do you think they fit into this middle-income country of yours?
Of course, the humanitarian need is equal around the world. So I think the problem now that Iraqi people can overcome their antagonism, political antagonism, and go forward for development. Iraq, as you know, and as all people knows, is a rich country. So there is no lack of money, and we have everything in this country. We have the fortune, but the problem mainly concentrate on political situation.
Let's put that to Ms. McNabb. How does the UN view this political standoff at the moment, 5 months on, and there's still no credible government, or was no government at all in the country after elections? I know that the UN supported the elections as a free and fair process. What is your view of what's happening now, and how do you think that'll affect your work?
Well, the election itself went very well. A lot of us were out monitoring and watching the election, and in parts of the country there was just such joy and pleasure in being able to vote. So I think there is a lot of disappointment on many sides about the slow process in building a new government. Of course, there is a government of Iraq. The old government is still governing the country, and things are still getting done. But what we really need now to move forward is, of course, that a compromise is found and that we have a government that can truly lead the development of the country. Because as you have said, and as Mr. Baban has said, this country is not without wealth, but the conflict has had a terrible and devastating impact on the quality of life of many people. And that's what we're trying to rebuild already now. And we are doing quite a lot now, but with stability and with a new government in leadership, of course we could do a lot more and a lot faster. The main problem for the UN is the violence, that we're having to do a lot of our projects and our work with the government at a distance, and now that we really want to work on areas like quality of health and education, we need to be able to bring in more international experience. That's very, very difficult unless the violence is under control.
And of course the violence is not going to get under control, Mr. Baban, until there is a coalition government in place. The latest coalition talks fell apart because of a sectarian issue. Do you think sectarian issues are still a problem when it comes to issuing funds and infrastructure within the country?
I think the sectarian affiliation and a sectarian problem is not well rooted or not deep rooted in Iraqi society. But the problem in the politician,
political level, isn't it?
Yes, I understand that. But the problem related to the politicians themselves and some foreign agenda in this country. I think Iraqi at the end of the day are able to solve their problem by dialogue and by accord. But the problem now, the foreign agenda and the intervention in country situation and in country affairs.
Ms. McNabb, James Dobbins, a former ambassador to Afghanistan and other countries, said, "I don't think the state has ever operated on its own, independent of the US military, in an environment that is quite as threatening on such a large scale. It is unprecedented in scale." Do you think that's why the UN has now stepped in to push forward these goals, to fill in that vacuum, to do what the Iraqi government is not capable of doing?
We do it with the government because no country can be developed from outside. We work on the Millennium Development Goals with Iraq as we do everywhere else because Iraq is a member state of the United Nations. They have signed up for the Millennium Declaration and the goals. And this, together with other international conventions and treaties in areas such as environment, they are what are guiding our work with the government. And these goals, which really help the most vulnerable, they're also a humanitarian agenda. And I think we in the world and international community, we just have to stand by the people of Iraq. We can't just say it's too difficult or it's too dangerous.
So
We
is
just have to keep
the
going.
timing now of your ambitions to push forward these Millennium Development Goals and signing on the dotted line for the next 5 years, does this have anything to do with the withdrawal of US troops?
No, not at all, because we started working with the Ministry of Planning on the publication which you referred to earlier, because this is the 10th anniversary of the Millennium Declaration, and there will be a high-level meeting, a summit meeting in New York, 20th, 22nd of September. And what we really wanted to do, despite the difficulty, was really make the best assessment possible of where we are on all the goals, because unless you do that, you don't know where to put the resources. And I think we have now a much better idea of where we want to go and what we need to do. But the United Nations, we're the supporting part of this partnership. It is the government that must take leadership, but not just the national government. We work with the government right down to local level of municipalities and governorates. And that is where a lot of the work is being done already.
Do you think the government is quite able to do this, Mr. Baban? And do you think the withdrawal of the US troops will make your humanitarian work easier?
Yes, I think the withdrawal, American withdrawal, would not affect us too much because the problem is internal mainly. And now the government of Iraq try to face their challenges by itself. I think we would defeat the terrorism at the end and we would go forward to build our country. But we understand that this mission is not easy, so really we need the assistance of United Nations, and for our friend and Iraqi government would undertake to do its best and all to do all efforts which is required to build the country. But as you know, nobody can ignore the challenges and the threat on security situation.
Ms. McNabb, it's more than just security, isn't it? And I want to quote from a report that the UN released last week on International Youth Day and launch of the International Year of the Youth. Rather alarming statistics. 62% of the youth interviewed believe that a family member can kill a girl for offending family honor. 92% agree that a woman should ask permission before seeking work. More than 300,000 Iraqis aged between 10 and 18 have never even attended school. 65% of them don't even know how to use a computer. And lastly, youth unemployment reached 30%. That's double the national rate. I mean, shocking figures, obviously, shocking statistics. With those in mind, how do you adapt your goals to suit the country?
I was as shocked as you are when I read the statistics. And the statistics really tell us what happens after 2 decades of conflict, because we're now talking about young people who have grown up not knowing a peaceful society where things are done in a more or less normal way, where they go to school, proceed to secondary school, and then get a job. It hasn't been like that for them. It has been a struggle from start to finish. If you want another shocking figure, very, very few children manage to get through the complete secondary education. So in the end, only about 20% of the age group can manage to go through full secondary school. And this again is partly the result of the conflict, because parents are afraid to send their children to secondary school. The local primary school, that's fine, it's in their neighborhood and they have control there, but it's very difficult. And then of course youth are disillusioned, and that is dangerous. They need to be supported. So for us, they're an absolutely primary target group for support. And the quotes on the attitudes towards domestic affairs, what they think about how women should behave in the family, what rights they have over women, this is a big problem not only in Iraq, and we have other countries with the same problem. And what really needs to happen now is that as peace and stability come, we have to help Iraq open its borders, not just to trade, but also to new ideas about how to do things. And respect for women has to be one of the very big changes in the society. And it doesn't take a year or two to do. We are talking about something that might take decades.
Mr.
But we
Baban,
have to
how
start
are you going
somewhere.
to...
You can't just say we don't start it.
Of course. Mr. Baban,
How do
you
it?
make that happen? Let me put that to Mr. Baban first. I mean, you've got a country that's becoming increasingly religious. How does that affect women, and how does it affect, what sort of impact does it have on girls
Well,
going to school? Mr. Baban.
As you know, the social goals, as you know, is the most difficult goals in any development plan. We should deal with these goals in a smooth way, as you know, in a traditional and conservative society. But Iraqi government has an ambitious plan to increase the percentage of girls who join the schools and who enroll the different types of education. I want to say that we have a 5-year plan for development, and United Nations really praise this plan highly. But the challenge, as you know, always is political and security situation.
Because you have one of the most youthful countries in the world. Something like 50% of your population is under the age of 19. And if anything, the fact that they have no employment, that so many of them are not going to school, their future is looking pretty bleak, not what the Americans promised you.
Yes, I agree with you about that. But this is our challenge. We would face it. The problem now related to the standard of living as a whole. I think with development, with a successful development, we can reduce all those phenomena in a short time. But we should raise the standard of living. We should overcome the poverty. I think by doing that, we can improve all situation of not for ladies and girls only, but for all classes of the societies.
Do you agree with that, Mr. McNabb?
I would agree that you can work and really focus on getting women and girls back into the mainstream. But I'd also like to say that, you know, having a youthful population is not necessarily all a bad thing. It's also a sense of optimism that we'll have many young and energetic people. And one of the things we are doing with the government of Iraq and with other donor countries, with the European Union, with the World Bank, is to work on getting the private sector back on its feet, getting the agricultural industry back on its feet, because we need to generate jobs, and the government can't just keep giving people civil service jobs. We have to have a dynamic and thriving private sector. And once we get that, and we are working very closely now with government on legislation to enable it, once that sector starts to come back up, there will be more jobs, there will be more sense of optimism among young people, because they'll actually have a goal with their education, which is to get out and get jobs and do what young people do the world over. Get educated, trained, work, get married, and bring up their own families.
Do you think
that
excuse me,
half the
interjecting
population
here,
under 19 is not just negative?
do you think the impartiality of the UN has been compromised by the attacks? And you mentioned it a little bit earlier on. You had the attack on the UN in which 22 staff members were killed. I know that World Humanitarian Day falls this week, but have those attacks affected the way you operate?
They didn't only affect the way we operate. Those attacks affected the way the whole of the international community has had to operate, because we have become a target. And one of the reasons that we have so many national officers, which is great because they're the people who know the country, but the other reason is that we are targets if we go out in some parts of the country. But again, I emphasize, you know, it's not all the same right over the country. There are parts of the country where we can work much more openly and freely. There are other parts which are so dangerous that even our national staff and humanitarian workers will not tell their neighbours that they work for an international organisation, be it the UN or anybody else. So getting the violence under control is absolutely essential, because obviously it does have a negative impact on development and on our ability to help. And aid workers have died in this country since then as well. We lost 22 when the Canal Hotel, our headquarters, was bombed. But since then, about another 70 aid workers have died. Many more have been injured. So we are here despite that because we actually believe in what we're doing. We
Mr.
can
Baban,
help the country develop.
do you think the country will be in a position within the foreseeable future where it'll be able to protect workers like the UN workers, where it'll be able to protect Iraqis themselves?
Despite all the current situation, I am optimistic about the future. I think the future is promising for Iraq. We have a country with a heritage. We have a rich country. We have a lot of resources. I think we would pass this gloomy situation. I think we would overcome our challenges. And at the end of the day, I think we would achieve our goal. But the track for that would not be easy.
And you've got to minimize the disparities, haven't you, between the rich and the poor in the country, the rural and the towns?
In spite of all of that, I think we would achieve our goal at the end of the day. And as I mentioned, the challenge is a lot, but we should face it. We should face it. This is our fate. This is our situation, and we need the assistance of the world. And for our friend, I think the involvement of United Nations is very positive in Iraqi affair, and most of Iraqis appreciate this role.
Ms. McNabb, what are your fears if these development goals are not achieved? Is there a potential tipping point as far as you're concerned?
I was going to say, if we're talking globally, of course, the one that is really very, very worrying for us is the environment goal. And Iraq, because of the conflicts, is just now beginning to catch up with work on the environment. And I think we have to take that seriously because that's the long-term sustainability of the country. If we talk about the Millennium Development Goals in Iraq, we have every reason to believe they can be achieved, not perhaps by 2015, which is the goal, but in a country which has been struggling with conflict for so long, it would be very, very surprising if we were able to do that. But progress is being made. Not all indicators are going downwards.
Christine McNabb from the UN and Ali Baban from the Iraqi government, thank you very much for talking to us and helping us to try and understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. It's not going to be easy, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To watch the show online, please go to our website, aljazeera.net/English. And on that note, we've reached the end of the show. Join Al Jazeera again next week when we have another look inside Iraq. Thanks for watching and goodbye.